So I've wanted to canoe Bassett Creek for a while. It starts at Medicine Lake and then runs all the way to Minneapolis, where it then goes into a tunnel, and then over the last mile or mile and a half, runs through that tunnel underneath downtown and then comes out into the Mississippi River. I started at East Medicine Lake Park. That gave me the shortest distance to go across the lake to get to the creek. To get into the creek, you're going to have to go over a little Lowhead Dam and then cross under a bridge underneath South Shore Drive. Now, before you begin this little adventure on Bassett Creek, you probably should go at various points along the creek and scout out the water levels. If the water's too low, you're going to be scraping bottom, hitting rocks, running into a lot of obstacles. If the water level's too high, that can be dangerous. The water's moving too quickly. You might encounter that you can't get underneath the bridges or through the culverts if they're too full of water. Another thing you're going to want to plan in advance is where are you going to put in? Are you going to start at the beginning, or are you going to start at a park and only do a portion of it? You also want to plan out where are you going to get out. If you make it all the way kind of towards the end, a lot of that is industrial downtown, and there's fences, especially by the Minneapolis impound lot. So you might not have an easy way of getting out of the creek and up to a street. I did check out a day or two in advance a few different places along the end of the creek before I pulled out, and I also checked a couple places the day before near the beginning. It looked like I was going to be really cutting it close, that there was maybe just enough water to get through. As it turns out, that was probably a little optimistic. I ended up walking probably a little bit more than I had wanted. And I ended up actually walking in the locations that I wasn't able to really scout out, more in the middle of the whole creek, where it was more residential, more private, and I was unable to get to the creek and actually check the levels. So honestly, if we don't get any more rain, I probably wouldn't attempt Bassett Creek again this summer. That being said, I had a great time. It did take me way longer than I thought. I had estimated that it would take me 4 to 5 hours, but all of the walking and pulling the canoe over obstacles like boulders and things really made it take longer, and honestly it took me about 8 hours. The portion of the creek that I did is supposed to only be about 12 miles. So that's about a mile and a half an hour. So that includes breaks, taking pictures. I did most of it using just a canoe paddle, and then when I started to get tired and wanted to move a little bit more quickly, I started using my kayak paddle that I'd also brought along. So for the first quarter to a third of the creek, the water level was all right, and I didn't really have to walk that much, and it was a lot of reeds, wetland kind of feel to the creek. Then eventually the environment around the creek turned into more of a wooded feel. Crazy to think that nature is able to survive at least around this creek in this major metropolitan area. If it wasn't for all the automobile noise and airplanes going overhead, you could probably forget that you were even in a city. So I did have to get out and walk my canoe when the water was too low or through obstacles, but there was one real portage that you have to make. That occurs here at Wisconsin Avenue. You can see that the creek is kind of dammed as part of some sort of flood prevention. Fortunately, all you have to do is portage to the right up over Wisconsin Avenue, and then you can enter the creek again. This section of the creek, this middle section between Wisconsin Avenue till just before maybe you get to Theo Worth Park, was the section where I had to do the most of the walking. I was scraping bottom most frequently in this section. Around Theo Worth, the creek tends to widen out a bit. and you get to start to see different kinds of birds, probably because this area actually can support larger fish. Theoworth might not even be a bad place to actually pull out of the creek. It has a lot of area for you to explore, and things tend to get a little bit more complicated beyond this point. After Theoworth, it's the final stretch. It starts to get a little more industrial. The creek starts to get a little bit more dirty, and the places to get out where there's public access become fewer. Perhaps if it's something you're interested in, a good pullout spot might be Ute Pills Brewing, because they're pretty much right there at the end and it would be a fun place to stop. I kept on going and ended up finishing at Van White Memorial Boulevard. That last stretch seemed like it had enough water, but I was often having to get out of the canoe and pull the canoe over boulders that were making kind of like mini dams. And here's Van White Memorial Boulevard. This is where I pulled out. I was able to portage up on the left-hand side up to the street. Beyond this, the creek goes into a tunnel that then goes underneath the city and empties into the Mississippi River.